They laughed when he pulled out an old, dusty rifle scope, until he proved it could hit a target faster than their AI ever could. This is how Earth won wars. That was the first thought racing through Lieutenant Aaron Kade's mind as he stood in the middle of the training bay, holding what looked like a relic from another era. The object in his hands was a rifle scope, old, scratched, and heavy, with glass lenses that had seen decades of use. Not the sleek, high-tech holographic scopes every soldier in the new interstellar military relied on. Those modern devices calculated trajectory, distance, wind, gravity anomalies, any enemy movement before a shooter even pulled the trigger. This scope, by contrast, relied on something far simpler, the human mind. A ripple of whispers ran through the cadets behind him. Some shook their heads, others laughed outright, certain that their instructor had finally lost it. "Sir, you're serious?" a cadet asked, voice trembling between disbelief and amusement. He tried to stifle a smirk, but it broke through anyway. Aaron swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room on him, the judgment, the skepticism, the sheer incredulity. He knew exactly what they were thinking. Why would anyone waste their time with this antique when we have machines that can do everything better? But that was precisely the point. Aaron's life had been built on understanding technology, on respecting it, mastering it, but he had also learned an even more important truth. Technology alone does not win wars. He had spent years studying the battles of old Earth, reading mission reports from soldiers who had fought with what the cadets would call primitive equipment, and yet had achieved feats that seemed impossible. These cadets, most of them born on colonies, light years from the homeworld, had grown up in a universe where war was fought with automated defense grids and quantum targeting systems. They had no concept of the raw personal skill that once turned the tide of battle. They had never been taught that a single human, armed with nothing but determination, training, and a simple tool, could outthink and outshoot overwhelming forces. Today, Aaron intended to change that. Today, he would make them see why the old ways, the human ways, were still worth understanding. He raised the scope, adjusted it carefully, and let his calm, deliberate movements speak louder than their laughter. The lesson was about to begin. The instructor's lounge buzzed with whispered jokes, the kind that carried just loud enough for Aaron to hear. Cadets and officers alike leaned against tables, folding their arms, shaking their heads in amusement. To them, it seemed absurd, almost tragic, that a decorated lieutenant would insist on demonstrating an old, dusty rifle scope when they had access to cutting-edge AI targeting systems that could calculate trajectories, wind resistance, gravitational anomalies, and even enemy movement with flawless precision. "Why are we even wasting time on that?" muttered one officer, voice dripping with disbelief. "We have AI systems that do this in a fraction of a second. You could fire 100 rounds and still not miss with those." A ripple of snickers spread across the cadets. Some tried to stifle laughter, others openly rolled their eyes, convinced this demonstration would end in embarrassment. Aaron could feel their doubts pressing against him like a physical force. A tidal wave of skepticism fueled by their dependence on technology. He ignored it. Every whisper, every smirk, every raised eyebrow only strengthened his resolve. Slowly, deliberately, he mounted the old scope onto his rifle, his fingers working with care and precision. To anyone watching, the motions seemed almost comically adjusting knobs by hand, peering through lenses, measuring distances without a single digital readout. It was a stark contrast to the sleek, instant feedback devices everyone else relied on. The cadets couldn't hide their amusement. A few snickered openly, exchanging glances as if sharing a private joke. Some muttered, "This is ridiculous," under their breath. Aaron raised the rifle, lined up his first shot, and held the room in suspense for a moment longer than necessary. The silence was thick, charged with disbelief. Then he fired. The shot pierced the target dead center. A second shot, equally precise, followed, and a third. Every bullet hit exactly where he intended. No digital guidance, no fancy computer calculations, just pure human skill, honed instinct, and the clarity provided by that old-style scope. For a moment, There was complete silence. Even the most cynical cadets froze, their laughter choked back as they stared in shock. The officers' mouths hung open. The smug confidence of their AI superiority evaporated in an instant. Aaron lowered the rifle slowly, letting the room absorb the reality of what had just happened. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a trick. It was the result of understanding the tool, understanding the environment, and trusting in one's own training. In that instant, the old scope was no longer a relic, it was a testament to human skill. The kind of skill that had once turned the tide of wars. Aaron lowered the rifle. The metallic click echoing faintly in the now silent training bay. He let the weight of the demonstration settle for a moment before speaking. His voice calm, but carrying authority. "Do you know why we call this the old-style scope?" he asked, sweeping his gaze across the cadets' faces. Their curiosity had replaced the smirks and laughter from just moments ago. Silence, not one hand raised. They didn't know. Aaron nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. "Of course you wouldn't. Most of you have grown up in a world where wars are fought by machines-eye soldiers, automated fleets, orbital defense grids that never miss. You've never had to rely on raw human skill to survive. But this scope." He lifted it slightly for emphasis, letting the cadets take in the worn leather, the scratched lenses, the simple mechanics. "This scope represents something far more powerful than any machine." He paused, letting his words sink in. This was the type of scope our soldiers used during the Terran Wars, long before interstellar AI weapons existed. Entire battles were won with nothing more than human intuition, patience, and relentless training. Fleets, entire planets, sometimes it wasn't the machines that won, it was the humans who used them wisely. Humans who could calculate, adapt, and act faster than any AI could predict. A few cadets exchanged uneasy glances. To them, the idea sounded almost laughable. They had grown up hearing stories of heroic AI soldiers, of fleets guided by flawless computer logic, of wars decided by algorithms rather than humans. The thought that Earth's survival had depended on human skill alone seemed almost unbelievable. Aaron walked over to the wall and tapped a holographic map of the First Terran War. Planets glowed red, fleets were marked with blinking lights, battle zones highlighted. "Here," he said, pointing, "this was Earth's last stand, outnumbered 10-1, outgunned, technologically behind on every front. Advanced systems failed, some lagged, and nearly every planet fell. All seemed lost." He stepped back, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. And yet, Earth didn't lose. Not because of superior AI, not because of perfect technology, because humans understood their tools, understood strategy, and adapted faster than any machine could. The survival of our world depended on the ability of individuals to think, anticipate, and act when the odds were impossible. A hush settled over the room. The cadets weren't just listening, they were realizing. They were beginning to understand that history, human skill, and intuition mattered even in a universe dominated by machines. Aaron moved deliberately back to the firing line, his boots echoing softly against the metallic floor of the training bay. The room was quiet now, no laughter, no whispers, just an almost palpable tension. Every cadet leaned in, their eyes fixed on him, eager to see what came next. "Watch closely," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "This isn't about nostalgia. It's about understanding that technology is only as good as the hands that use it. No AI, no supercomputer, no automated targeting system can replace skill, patience, and understanding." He handed the old-style scope to a cadet, a young recruit, whose hands shook slightly as he gripped the rifle. The target was far downrange, moving steadily across a marked course. The cadet took a deep breath, squinting through the scope, trying to align himself. The first shot went wide. The second shot barely grazed the edge of the target. The third shot didn't even hit it. Frustration welled up in the cadet's eyes, and he cursed under his breath. Whispers began to ripple through the other recruits, doubts creeping back in, memories of laughter threatening to return. Aaron placed a steady hand on the cadet's shoulder. "Slow down. Don't rush. Watch the wind. Measure the distance. See the subtle changes in light. Every detail matters. Focus, anticipate, and trust yourself. The cadet nodded, taking a deep breath. He repositioned the rifle, adjusted the scope, and held the trigger with careful intent. Then it clicked. On the fourth shot, the bullet struck the target dead center with a sharp, satisfying ping. Gasps filled the room. Cadets froze, jaws dropping, eyes wide. Murmurs spread. Did he just? No way. They had expected failure, ridicule, or at best, a lucky hit. Instead, they saw precision, mastery, and the power of a trained human mind working in perfect harmony with a simple tool. Aaron smiled, lowering the rifle and letting the moment linger. That's how Earth won wars, he said quietly, his tone carrying a weight that silenced even the whispering cadets. Not because we had the best tech, not because we had unbeatable weapons, but because we had people who could outthink, outlast, and outshoot our enemies when it counted. People who could adapt when machines failed, who could find solutions no algorithm could predict. The room remained quiet, filled with awe and newfound respect. The recruits were no longer skeptical. They weren't just learning how to shoot, they were learning a lesson in human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring power of skill over reliance on technology. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by something heavier, more profound, awe, respect, and a spark of understanding that couldn't be measured by AI efficiency ratings or system diagnostics. The cadets, once skeptical, now looked at Aaron not as a relic clinging to outdated methods, but as a teacher who had just opened their eyes to something far greater than technology alone. They crowded around him, voices overlapping as questions poured out. How did you know exactly where to aim? What's the trick to reading the wind like that? Could a regular soldier really do that in an actual battle? Their curiosity was genuine now, burning, insatiable. Aaron smiled, shaking his head gently. Slow down, he said, holding up a hand. The room quieted instantly. All of you are thinking in terms of technology. And yes, the tech we have now is incredible. It can do things that would have been unimaginable a century ago. But here's the truth. Machines can calculate, predict, and automate, but they can't adapt in a crisis. They can't anticipate human cunning. They can't improvise when plans fall apart. Humans can. That's why the old-style scope, and the skills it represents, are not obsolete. They are reminders. Tools are only part of the battle. Strategy, intuition, patience, and courage, those decide the rest. The cadets absorbed his words, some nodding slowly, others staring wide-eyed, realizing how much they had underestimated human skill. The room felt different now, charged with a quiet energy of respect and purpose. From that day forward, the old scopes were no longer the subject of ridicule. They were handled with reverence, cleaned and maintained with care, and used as a symbol of the lessons history had taught. Cadets who trained with them learned more than accuracy, they learned patience, observation, and the value of thinking critically in a high-stakes moment. They understood that victory never comes from gadgets alone. It comes from people who know how to use them, who understand their environment, their enemies, and themselves, even long after the lesson ended. The words Aaron had spoken lingered in the minds of every cadet who had been there. That's how Earth won wars. It wasn't just a history lesson. It was a philosophy, a creed, a reminder that in the vastness of space and the chaos of conflict, it was human skill, not machines, that had shaped the fate of worlds. And in that quiet, unassuming training bay, a new generation of soldiers finally understood why the past still mattered on, why they were the future.